The massive alien ship hung in space above Earth like a dark cloud that blocked out the stars. Admiral Jake Morrison stood at the window of the defense station and watched the enormous vessel with growing anger in his chest. The ship was bigger than any city he had ever seen, and its black metal surface seemed to swallow light itself. 3 days ago, it had appeared without warning, and now it sat there like a judge waiting to pass sentence on all of humanity. Jake turned away from the window and walked back to the command center where his officers were working frantically at their stations. The alien ship had been sending messages for hours, and finally they had found someone who could translate the strange sounds into human words. Commander Lisa Chen looked up from her computer screen with worry written across her face. She had been working with the translation software since dawn, and Jake could see that whatever the aliens were saying was not good news. "What do they want, Lisa?" Jake asked as he stopped beside her workstation. The young commander pushed her dark hair away from her eyes and looked at the screen one more time before answering. The alien language was unlike anything humans had ever heard before, with clicking sounds and deep vibrations that hurt the ears. But the computer had finally started to make sense of the patterns, and the message was becoming clear. "They call themselves the Galactic Council, Admiral, and they say we have 72 hours to surrender," Lisa said quietly. "The leader is something called High Arbiter Zex Thul, and he claims that Earth belongs to them now. They want us to give up all our weapons and let them move our people to what they call designated zones. They say humanity has been expanding too fast into space and that we have broken their laws." Jake felt his hands curl into fists at his sides. Humanity had only been traveling to other planets for 50 years, and they had never met another intelligent species before today. Now these aliens were claiming that humans had broken laws they had never heard of and demanding complete surrender. The Admiral had spent his whole life protecting Earth, and he was not about to hand it over to creatures from another world. "What happens if we refuse?" Jake asked, even though he was afraid he already knew the answer. Lisa looked back at her screen, and her face grew even more worried as she read the translation. The alien message was long and detailed and full of threats that made her stomach turn. These creatures had been traveling between stars for thousands of years, and they had conquered hundreds of other worlds. "They say they will implement what they call complete pacification," Lisa replied. "From what I can understand, that means they will destroy all our cities and kill anyone who resists. They claim to have done this to 17 other species that refuse to obey their rules. The survivors get moved to prison planets where they work in mines until they die." Jake walked over to the main communications panel and opened a channel to Earth. Within minutes, he was connected to President Helen Baker in her emergency bunker deep beneath the White House. The president looked tired and older than her 60 years, but her voice was still strong when she spoke. She had been briefing world leaders for hours about the alien threat and trying to coordinate a response. "Admiral Morrison, what is the situation up there?" President Baker asked. Jake could see other officials moving around in the background of the video call, including General Carlos Rodriguez, who commanded all of Earth's military forces. The general stepped into view, and Jake could see that he looked as grim as everyone else. They all knew that Earth's small fleet of warships would be no match for the alien vessel hanging over their planet. "Madam President, the aliens have given us 3 days to surrender completely," Jake reported. "They want us to disarm all our weapons and allow them to relocate our population. If we refuse, they threaten to destroy our civilization and enslave the survivors. Their ship is massive, and our scans show it carries enough firepower to level entire continents." President Baker nodded slowly, and Jake could see her thinking through their limited options. Earth had only 43 frigates and 12 destroyers, spread across the solar system. The aliens had traveled across the galaxy, which meant their technology was far beyond anything humans possessed. A direct fight would be suicide, but surrender meant the end of human freedom forever. "General Rodriguez, what are our military options?" the president asked. The general stepped forward, and his weathered face showed the strain of the impossible situation. He had spent his career preparing for wars between human nations, but nothing had prepared him for an alien invasion. Every strategy he could think of ended with the complete destruction of Earth's forces. "Madam President, we have run every scenario through our computers," General Rodriguez said. "Our entire fleet combined could not penetrate the shields on that single alien ship. Intelligence suggests they have hundreds more ships scattered throughout the galaxy. In a conventional war, we would last maybe 6 hours before being completely destroyed. Down on the moon, Dr. Amanda Wells was working in her secret laboratory far beneath the surface. She was humanity's leading expert on experimental weapons, and for 3 years she had been developing something that might give Earth a fighting chance. The quantum cascade device was based on theories that most scientists thought were impossible, but Amanda believed it could work. The weapon would tear apart the basic forces that held matter together and create an expanding wave of destruction. Her assistant, Dr. Kevin Park, was running calculations on the prototype, while Amanda made final adjustments to the device. The weapon was untested and extremely dangerous, but it might be humanity's only hope against the alien fleet. If her theories were correct, one cascade device could destroy an entire enemy formation. But if she was wrong, it might tear apart the solar system itself. "Kevin, are you getting stable readings?" Amanda asked as she connected the last power coupling. The device hummed with dangerous energy, and warning lights flashed across the control panel. Kevin checked his instruments twice before answering, because he wanted to be absolutely certain of his readings. The power levels were beyond anything they had ever measured before. "The containment field is holding, Doctor, but I am seeing some fluctuations in the quantum matrix," Kevin replied nervously. "If we activate this device, there is a 30% chance it could destabilize and destroy everything within a light-year radius. That includes Earth and everyone on it." Amanda nodded, grimly, because she understood the risks better than anyone. But she also knew that surrender meant the end of humanity as a free species. Sometimes the only choice was between certain death and possible survival. She sealed the device in its transport container and prepared to contact Admiral Morrison. Earth would not go quietly into slavery. Back on the defense station, Jake received the final message from the alien ship. High Arbiter Zexthul was demanding an immediate answer to their ultimatum. The creature's voice came through the speakers like grinding metal, and its words were filled with arrogance and contempt for the human species. Jake looked around at his officers and saw determination in their faces despite the hopeless odds they were facing. President Baker appeared on the main screen with her final decision. "Admiral Morrison, please transmit our response to the alien ship. Tell them that Earth will never surrender, and that if they want our world, they will have to take it over our dead bodies. Humanity chooses freedom even if it means death." Captain Ryan Brooks sat in the cramped cockpit of his stealth ship and watched the alien fleet through his sensors. The small vessel called Shadow's Edge was designed to be invisible to enemy detection systems, and Ryan had spent the last 2 days moving closer to the massive alien formation. His mission was dangerous but absolutely critical to humanity's desperate plan for survival. The alien ships were arranged in perfect geometric patterns that stretched for thousands of miles in every direction. Ryan counted over 800 vessels of different sizes and shapes representing dozens of alien species that belonged to the Galactic Council. Some ships looked like giant insects with multiple wings, while others resembled sea creatures with tentacles flowing behind them. All of them bristled with weapons that could turn Earth into a ball of molten rock. Ryan activated his communication system and began transmitting false information using captured alien codes. His technical team had broken the enemy encryption after studying their broadcasts for 3 days straight. Now he was feeding the aliens fake intelligence about Earth's defenses, making humanity's military seem even weaker than it actually was. The aliens needed to believe that Earth was completely helpless and would be easy to conquer. "Enemy fleet, this is Reconnaissance Unit 7 reporting defensive positions," Ryan said into his microphone using the alien communication protocols. "Human vessels number approximately 20 ships total with primitive weapon systems. No energy, shields detected and minimal armor plating observed. Estimated time for complete conquest is 4 hours maximum." The response came back in the clicking alien language that Ryan's computer translated into human words. The alien commander acknowledged the report and ordered his fleet to prepare for what they called a pacification operation. Ryan smiled grimly as he listened to the aliens making plans to destroy Earth's cities and enslave the human population. They had no idea what humanity had prepared for them. Meanwhile, on Earth, Commander Susan Martinez was working frantically. in the orbital shipyards above the planet. Her team of engineers was converting every available civilian vessel into a weapon of war. Cargo ships that normally carried food between planets were being fitted with military-grade engines and guidance systems. Mining vessels that extracted ore from asteroids were loaded with special payloads that would surprise the alien fleet. Susan watched as her people welded armor plates onto a luxury passenger liner that had been designed to carry wealthy tourists to Mars. The beautiful ship with its elegant curves and panoramic windows was being transformed into something much deadlier. Every civilian vessel was being modified according to the same basic plan, and each one would carry a small crew of volunteers who knew they were probably going to die. "How many ships do we have ready, Commander?" asked Lieutenant Paul Davis as he climbed up from the lower decks. The young officer was covered in grease and metal shavings from helping install the new equipment. He had been working for 18 hours straight, but refused to rest while Earth was in danger. "We have finished modifications on 67 vessels, Paul," Susan replied as she checked her list. "That includes everything from small cargo haulers to the big ore processing ships. Each one has been equipped with enhanced engines and navigation computers. The crews are all volunteers and they understand that this is a one-way mission. The volunteers came from every part of human society, including farmers and teachers and shopkeepers who had never been in space before. But they all understood that Earth needed them, and they were willing to give their lives for humanity's freedom." Susan felt proud and heartbroken at the same time as she watched these ordinary people preparing to become heroes. On Mars, Colonel Danny White was coordinating with human settlements throughout the solar system. The colonies on Jupiter's moons and Saturn's rings had received coded messages telling them to begin emergency evacuations. Every human installation beyond Earth was implementing something called Protocol 7, which was so secret that most military officers had never heard of it. Danny stood in the communications center of the Mars colony and watched as transport ships loaded with essential personnel prepared to leave for deep space stations. The colonists were being told it was a routine training exercise, but Danny knew the truth. If humanity's plan failed, then these evacuated people would be all that remained of the human race. "Colonel, we have confirmation from Europa Base," reported Sergeant Lisa Murphy from her communications station. "They have successfully evacuated all critical personnel to the backup facility in the outer asteroid belt. Titan Station reports similar success, and they are maintaining radio silence as ordered." Danny nodded and made another mark on his status board. The outer colonies contained humanity's most advanced research facilities and manufacturing plants. If Earth fell to the aliens, then these hidden installations would continue the fight, and maybe someday find a way to take back the homeworld. It was a desperate backup plan, but better than complete extinction. Back on Luna Base, Dr. Amanda Wells was putting the finishing touches on her quantum cascade devices. The weapons worked by disrupting the fundamental forces that held atoms together and creating expanding fields of pure destruction. She had built 12 of the devices using every rare element that Earth possessed, and each one was more powerful than humanity's largest nuclear bomb. Her assistant, Kevin Park, was running final safety checks on the transport containers, while Amanda programmed the activation sequences. The weapons were completely untested because any test would have destroyed the moon and everyone on it. They were gambling everything on theoretical physics and mathematical equations that might be completely wrong. "Amanda, I have to ask you one more time," Kevin said as he sealed the last container. "Are you absolutely certain these devices will work as designed? If the cascade reaction spreads beyond our calculations, it could destroy the entire solar system, including Earth." Amanda looked at her friend and colleague with sadness in her eyes. She had run the calculations thousands of times and consulted with the best physicists on Earth. The quantum cascade weapons should work exactly as designed, but there was always a chance that they would trigger a chain reaction that would unmake reality itself. It was a terrible risk, but the alternative was definitely slavery and death for all of humanity. "Kevin, I am as certain as I can be given that we have never built anything like this before," Amanda replied honestly. "The theory is sound, and all our simulations show controlled cascade reactions. But you are right that we could accidentally destroy everything we are trying to save. Sometimes you have to choose between certain death and possible survival." The containers holding the quantum cascade devices were loaded onto fast courier ships and sent to specific coordinates throughout the solar system. Each weapon would be carried by one of the converted civilian vessels that Commander Martinez had prepared. The volunteers who would pilot these ships knew they were carrying something special, but they did not know exactly what kind of destruction they would unleash. Admiral Jake Morrison received reports from all the different parts of humanity's plan and felt the weight of command pressing down on his shoulders. In less than 24 hours, the alien fleet would attack Earth, and humanity would either win their freedom or die trying. There was no middle ground and no possibility of negotiation or compromise. Jake opened a communication channel to all human military units throughout the solar system. His message would reach every ship and every base where human soldiers waited for the battle to begin. The Admiral's voice was calm and steady despite the enormous pressure he was feeling. "This is Admiral Morrison speaking to all units," Jake said into his microphone. "In 18 hours, the alien fleet will begin their attack on Earth. We have prepared the best response possible given our limited resources and technology. Each of you has a vital role to play in humanity's survival. Remember that we fight not just for ourselves, but for every human being who will ever be born. Today we prove that Earth will never surrender." The alien High Arbiter Zexthal sent one final message to Earth demanding immediate submission to the Galactic Council. The creature's voice was full of arrogance and contempt as it described how humanity would be relocated to prison worlds and forced to work until they died. President Baker's response was broadcast on all frequencies throughout the solar system. "Come and take it," was all she said, but those 4 words carried the determination of 8 billion human beings who refused to kneel before alien masters. The battle began exactly at sunrise when the first alien weapons fired at Earth's outer defense platforms. Admiral Jake Morrison watched from his command station as bright beams of energy tore through the human installations like they were made of paper. The massive alien ships moved forward in perfect formation, while their weapons systematically destroyed every defensive position that Earth had built over the past 50 years. Jake forced himself to remain calm as he watched humanity's carefully constructed defenses crumble under the alien assault. The enemy ships were advancing exactly as his planners had predicted, and their arrogance was showing in every movement. The alien commanders clearly believed they were fighting primitive creatures who posed no real threat to their superior technology and numbers. "Admiral Morrison, our outer ring of defense platforms has been completely destroyed," reported Commander Lisa Chen from her position at the sensor station. "The enemy fleet is advancing in standard conquest formation and they appear to be taking their time. Intelligence estimates they will reach Earth orbit in approximately 4 hours at their current speed." Jake nodded and activated his communication system to contact all human forces scattered throughout the solar system. Phase 1 of humanity's desperate plan was proceeding perfectly, and now it was time to begin Phase 2. Everything depended on the alien fleet continuing to underestimate human capabilities and walking straight into the trap that had been prepared for them. Captain Ryan Brooks was hiding his stealth ship behind one of Jupiter's moons while he watched the alien fleet advance toward Earth. The massive enemy formation was spread out over thousands of miles, but they were staying in tight formation, which would work perfectly for humanity's plan. Ryan checked his navigation computer and confirmed that his squadron of 12 stealth ships was in perfect position. The stealth vessels had been accelerating for hours using Jupiter's gravity to slingshot them toward incredible speeds while remaining hidden from alien sensors. Each ship carried enough antimatter to destroy a city, but their real payload was something much more devastating. Ryan opened his communication channel to the other stealth ship captains. "Shadow Squadron, this is Shadow Leader beginning final approach," Ryan said quietly into his microphone. "Remember that timing is everything and we only get one chance at this. Wait for my signal before activating your payloads and make sure you reach your designated targets. The fate of humanity depends on what we do in the next hour." The other captains acknowledged his transmission with brief clicks on their radios. These men and women were the best pilots that humanity had ever trained, and they all understood that they were probably flying to their deaths. But they also knew that their sacrifice might save 8 billion people on Earth from slavery and extinction. Commander Susan Martinez stood in the control center of the orbital shipyard and watched as the first wave of converted civilian vessels launched toward the alien fleet. 67 ships that had once carried cargo and passengers were now flying directly at the most powerful military force in the galaxy. Each vessel carried a crew of 3 volunteers and a payload that would surprise the alien commanders. The converted ships looked exactly like what they were supposed to be, which was desperate civilian vessels trying to ram the enemy fleet. Susan watched her sensors as the alien ships barely bothered to target the approaching human vessels. The enemy was so confident in their superiority that they viewed the civilian ships as nothing more than an annoyance. "Commander Martinez, we are receiving transmissions from the civilian fleet," reported Lieutenant Paul Davis. "The crews are reporting successful launch and all ships are maintaining course toward their assigned targets. Estimated time to contact with enemy fleet is 37 minutes. Susan felt her heart pounding as she watched the small dots on her display screen moving toward the massive alien formation. Each of those dots represented 3 human beings who had volunteered to give their lives for Earth's freedom. She whispered, a prayer for their souls, and hoped that their sacrifice would not be in vain. The alien High Arbiter Zex Thul stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the pathetic human attack with something resembling amusement. The primitive creatures were actually trying to ram his warships with converted cargo vessels, which was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. He had seen dozens of species attempt similar desperate attacks, and they always ended the same way. "Combat Commander, what is your assessment of the human attack?" Zex Thul asked his tactical officer. The insectoid alien studied his instruments for a moment before responding with the clicking sounds that served as their language. The human ships were moving fast, but they carried no significant weapons and posed no real threat to the Council. Fleet. High Arbiter. The human vessels appear to be standard civilian craft with minimal modifications, the combat commander replied. Our shields can easily absorb any damage from ramming attacks, and our point defense systems can destroy the ships before they reach us. I recommend we allow a few impacts to demonstrate our superiority before destroying the rest. Zex Thul agreed with this assessment and ordered his fleet to continue advancing while ignoring most of the approaching human vessels. This would be an excellent opportunity to show the humans how hopeless their situation really was. After witnessing the destruction of their pathetic attack, the human leaders would surely surrender and accept their fate as slaves. The first converted civilian ship reached the alien fleet exactly 36 minutes after launch. The vessel had once been a mining ship called Fortune Hunter, but now it carried something that would change the course of the battle. The volunteer crew of Captain Tony Walsh and engineers Mary Chen and Bob Davis activated their payload just before impact with an alien destroyer. Instead of the conventional explosion that the aliens expected, something much more terrifying began to happen. The quantum cascade device activated and started tearing apart the fundamental forces that held matter together. Reality itself began to unravel around the impact point as the weapon created an expanding sphere of pure annihilation that consumed everything it touched. The alien destroyer simply ceased to exist as the cascade field expanded outward in all directions. The weapon did not just destroy the enemy ship, it erased it from existence, leaving nothing but empty space where a massive warship had been floating moments before. The expanding field of destruction continued growing as it consumed the vacuum of space itself. High Arbiter Zex Thul screamed orders in 17 different alien languages as he watched his destroyer disappear into nothingness. His sensors showed readings that violated every known law of physics as the human weapon created a zone of absolute destruction that was still expanding. This was not possible according to Council science, but his own eyes showed him the impossible truth. "Combat Commander, what kind of weapon can completely erase matter from existence?" Zex Thul demanded, as alarms began sounding throughout his flagship. The tactical officer was frantically studying his instruments, but the readings made no sense according to everything the Council knew about physics and warfare. The humans had somehow created a weapon that unmade reality itself. "High Arbiter, I cannot explain what we are observing," the combat commander replied with obvious fear in his clicking voice. "The human weapon appears to be destabilizing the quantum foundation of local space-time. If this reaction continues expanding, it could consume our entire fleet and potentially spread throughout the solar system." More converted civilian ships reached their targets and activated their quantum cascade devices. Each weapon created another expanding sphere of annihilation that consumed alien warships and continued growing. The cascade fields began merging with each other, creating larger zones of destruction that erased everything they touched from existence. Captain Ryan Brooks watched the alien fleet dissolving into chaos as the quantum weapons did their terrible work. The enemy ships were trying to retreat, but they were trapped between Earth's remaining defenses and the expanding fields of annihilation. Their superior numbers had become a liability as ships crashed into each other while attempting to escape. Shadow. Squadron, this is Shadow Leader beginning final attack run. Ryan transmitted to his fellow pilots. The enemy is in full retreat and this is our chance to finish them. Activate your payloads on my mark and remember that we are doing this for every human being who will ever live. The 12 stealth ships emerged from behind Jupiter at incredible speed and raced toward the alien command vessels. The enemy fleet was so busy trying to escape the cascade fields that they did not notice the approaching human ships until it was too late. Ryan's squadron carried the largest quantum cascade devices that Dr. Amanda Wells had built. Dr. Wells was monitoring the cascade reactions from her bunker beneath Luna Base and watching her theoretical weapons work beyond her wildest calculations. The quantum fields were spreading faster than she had predicted, but they were also showing signs of eventually stabilizing. The fate of the solar system was balanced on the edge of a knife. Kevin, the cascade reactions are exceeding our mathematical models, Amanda said to her assistant as she watched the sensor readings. The weapons are working perfectly, but they are also creating larger destruction fields than we calculated. The quantum cascade fields continued expanding outward from the battle zone, consuming everything in their path with terrifying efficiency. Admiral Jake Morrison watched from his command station as the alien fleet dissolved into nothingness, while reality itself seemed to be unraveling around them. The weapons that Dr. Amanda Wells had created were working far beyond anyone's expectations, but they were also spreading faster than her calculations had predicted. Jake opened communication channels to every human vessel remaining in the solar system as he prepared to coordinate humanity's final desperate gambit. The cascade reactions had destroyed most of the alien fleet, but some enemy ships were still trying to escape toward the outer edge of the solar system. If even one alien vessel managed to reach the galaxy beyond, then the location of Earth would be revealed to the rest of the Galactic Council. All human vessels, this is Admiral Morrison initiating Protocol 7 final phase. Jake transmitted across all military frequencies. Every ship and every installation in the solar system is ordered to activate their quantum cascade devices immediately. We cannot allow any enemy vessels to escape and warn the galaxy about our location. This is humanity's final stand, and we will either achieve complete victory or die trying. The response came back from dozens of human installations scattered throughout the solar system. Every military base and every space station had been secretly equipped with quantum cascade devices during the past 3 days. Even the smallest outposts carried weapons that could tear holes in reality itself. Jake felt the weight of command, pressing down on his shoulders as he gave the order that would either save humanity or destroy the entire solar system. Captain Ryan Brooks led his squadron of stealth ships in their final attack run against the alien command vessels. The enemy fleet was trapped between Earth and the expanding cascade fields, but some of their largest ships were still fighting back with devastating weapons. Ryan's tactical display showed 3 alien dreadnoughts trying to break through the human defensive line and reach open space. The stealth ships approached their targets at incredible speed while the alien vessels fired desperately in all directions. Ryan could see the massive enemy ships up close now, and they were even more terrifying than he had imagined. Each dreadnought was miles long with weapon systems that could crack planets, but they were also panicking as their crews watched their fleet disappear into nothingness. Shadow Squadron, arm your quantum payloads and prepare for simultaneous detonation, Ryan ordered over his communication system. Remember that we are carrying the largest cascade devices ever built, and they will consume everything within a 1,000-mile radius. This is our chance to end the war, but we will not be coming home. His fellow pilots acknowledged the order with brief transmissions, and Ryan felt proud to be fighting alongside such brave men and women. They had all volunteered for this mission knowing it was suicide, but also knowing that their deaths might save billions of human lives. The stealth ships activated their final approach vectors and prepared to ram the alien dreadnoughts. On Earth, Dr. Amanda Wells was frantically monitoring the cascade reactions from her underground laboratory while trying to calculate whether the expanding fields would eventually stabilize. Her instruments showed quantum disruptions spreading across millions of miles of space, and the mathematics involved were beyond anything that human science had ever attempted before. Her assistant, Kevin Park, was running emergency protocols to try to contain the cascade reactions before they consumed the entire solar system. The weapons were working perfectly, but they were also feeding on the fabric of space-time itself and growing larger with each passing minute. Kevin's calculations showed that they had maybe 30 minutes before the cascade fields reached Earth orbit. "Amanda, the reaction rates are accelerating beyond our mathematical models," Kevin said as he studied the incoming data. "The cascade fields are not just destroying matter, they are actually feeding on the quantum vacuum and using that energy to expand even faster. If we cannot find a way to stop them, they will consume Earth within the hour." Amanda worked desperately to find a solution while monitoring reports from across the solar system. Every quantum cascade device that humanity possessed was now active and creating overlapping fields of annihilation that stretched from Mercury to Jupiter. The weapons had succeeded in trapping the alien fleet, but they might also have doomed the human race to extinction. Commander Susan Martinez coordinated the evacuation of Earth's orbital facilities as the cascade fields continued expanding toward the inner solar system. Most of her personnel had already been moved to underground shelters, but there were still thousands of people working in space stations that could not be evacuated in time. She made the hardest decision of her military career and ordered all non-essential personnel to abandon their posts. "This is Commander Martinez to all orbital installations," she transmitted on emergency frequencies. "Begin immediate evacuation procedures and prepare for cascade field contact within 25 minutes. All personnel are ordered to reach minimum safe distance or take shelter in hardened bunkers. This is not a drill, and anyone who remains at their station will not survive." Susan watched her tactical display as hundreds of small transport ships launched from stations throughout Earth orbit, carrying everyone who could be evacuated. The cascade fields were approaching like a wall of death that consumed everything in its path. She had done everything possible to save her people, but knew that many would not make it to safety in time. High Arbiter Zex Thul managed to send one final desperate transmission from his flagship before the quantum cascade reaction reached his position. The alien commander had spent his entire life conquering primitive species for the Galactic Council, but he had never encountered anything like the weapons that humanity possessed. His final message was both a warning and a confession of complete defeat. "Emergency transmission to all Council forces," Zex Thul screamed into his communicator as his ship began to dissolve around him. "The human species possesses weapons that can unmake reality itself. They have created expanding fields of annihilation that consume everything, including the vacuum of space. Do not approach the Sol system under any circumstances, or these creatures will destroy the entire galaxy." The alien flagship disappeared into nothingness, along with its crew of 10,000 beings from across the galaxy. The most powerful military force that the Council had ever assembled was being erased from existence by weapons that violated every known law of physics. Zex Thul's final transmission would reach the Council homeworlds in several months and serve as humanity's declaration of war against the galaxy. Colonel Danny White coordinated the activation of quantum cascade devices throughout the outer solar system from his command post on Mars. Every human installation beyond the asteroid belt had been equipped with the terrible weapons, and now they were all activating simultaneously. The cascade fields began merging into a continuous barrier that would prevent any alien vessel from escaping. "Command, this is Mars Base reporting successful activation of all outer system cascade devices," Danny transmitted to Admiral Morrison. "We have confirmed destruction of enemy vessels attempting to flee toward interstellar space. The cascade barrier is now complete and extends from Jupiter orbit to the edge of the solar system. No alien ships have escaped." Danny watched his instruments as the quantum weapons created a wall of annihilation that stretched across billions of miles. Any alien probe or automated system that tried to approach Earth would be consumed by the cascade fields. Humanity had succeeded in isolating itself from the galaxy, but they had also trapped themselves within their own solar system. Admiral Morrison received reports from every human facility as the quantum cascade devices activated across the solar system simultaneously. The chain reaction was instantaneous and devastating as hundreds of weapons created overlapping fields of destruction that consumed everything in their path. The alien fleet was completely annihilated within minutes, but the cascade reactions were still spreading. Jake opened a final communication channel to President Baker and the world leaders who were hiding in underground bunkers. The battle was over and humanity had achieved total victory against impossible odds. But the cost was beyond anything they had imagined. The weapons that had saved Earth had also changed the solar system forever. Madam President, this is Admiral Morrison reporting complete destruction of the alien fleet, Jake said into his microphone. All enemy vessels have been eliminated and no hostile forces remain in the solar system. However, the cascade reactions are still expanding and we may have created a barrier that will prevent us from ever leaving our own solar system. President Baker acknowledged his report, while evacuation ships continued launching from Earth carrying essential personnel to deep underground shelters. The cascade fields were approaching the inner planets, and everyone knew that the next few hours would determine whether humanity survived its own victory. The weapons that had given them freedom might also have given them a prison made of annihilated space. Dr. Wells worked frantically to develop a way to stop the cascade reactions before they reached Earth orbit. 3 days after the battle, the quantum cascade fields finally stabilized at the very edge of the solar system, creating a barrier of nothingness that stretched across billions of miles. Admiral Jake Morrison stood at the observation deck of his damaged command station and looked out at where Jupiter used to be. The giant planet was gone, along with all its moons and the asteroid belt that had once provided raw materials for human industry. Earth had survived, but everything beyond Mars had been erased from existence, leaving only empty space where thriving human colonies had once existed. The cascade weapons had worked exactly as Dr. Amanda Wells had designed them, but they had consumed far more than anyone had calculated. Humanity was free, but they were also trapped within their own solar system by walls of annihilated space. Jake activated his communication system and opened a channel to President Helen Baker, who was emerging from her underground bunker along with other world leaders. The president looked exhausted but relieved as she surveyed the reports coming in from across the planet. Earth cities were intact, and the alien threat was completely eliminated, but the cost of victory was almost too high to comprehend. Admiral Morrison, what is our current status? President Baker asked as she reviewed the damage reports from across the solar system. I am seeing casualty figures that suggest we lost millions of people in the outer colonies when the cascade fields expanded. Are these numbers accurate, or are we still missing information from some installations? Jake had been dreading this conversation because the numbers were even worse than the initial reports suggested. The cascade weapons had consumed every human settlement beyond Mars, including the research stations on Europa and Titan that housed some of humanity's best scientists. The colonies that Colonel Danny White had evacuated represented less than 10% of the people who had been living in the outer system. Madam President, the casualty figures are accurate and possibly conservative, Jake replied sadly. We lost approximately 4.7 million people when the cascade fields expanded beyond our calculations. The weapons saved Earth, but they also destroyed most of our industrial capacity and research facilities. We are essentially starting over with just the resources available on Earth and Mars. President Baker nodded grimly as she processed the magnitude of what humanity had sacrificed for freedom. 4.7 million people had died to prevent 8 billion from becoming slaves, but that did not make their loss any easier to accept. These were pioneers and scientists and ordinary families who had been building humanity's future among the stars. On Mars, Colonel Danny White was coordinating rescue operations to search for any survivors who might have reached emergency shelters before the cascade fields arrived. His teams were using long-range sensors to scan the area where Jupiter had once orbited, but they were finding only empty space. The quantum weapons had not just destroyed matter, they had erased it from existence, leaving no trace that anything had ever been there. Colonel, we have completed our sensor sweeps of the outer system, reported Sergeant Lisa Murphy from her communication station. We are detecting no signs of survivors beyond the Mars orbital zone. The cascade fields appear to have consumed everything, including the emergency bunkers and deep space installations. Everyone who was evacuated to the backup facilities is gone. Danny felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on his shoulders as he realized that his evacuation orders had actually sent thousands of people to their deaths. The backup installations that were supposed to be safe havens had been consumed by the expanding cascade fields along with everyone inside them. His attempt to save lives had instead created a false sense of security. Dr. Amanda Wells was working in her laboratory beneath Luna Base, trying to understand exactly what her weapons had done to the fabric of space-time. The cascade devices had created zones where the fundamental forces of physics no longer functioned normally, and these areas seemed to be permanently altered. Her instruments showed readings that contradicted everything that human science understood about reality. Her assistant, Kevin Park, was analyzing samples of matter that had been collected near the edge of the cascade fields. The atomic structure of these materials showed signs of quantum instability that suggested the effects of the weapons might be spreading slowly outward. If his calculations were correct, the cascade fields could continue expanding for decades or even centuries. Amanda, I am seeing quantum decay patterns in these samples that worry me greatly, Kevin said, as he showed her his analysis. The matter near the cascade fields is showing signs of structural weakness that could lead to further breakdown. We may have created a zone of instability that will continue consuming normal space for hundreds of years. Amanda studied his data with growing concern, because Kevin's fears might be justified. The quantum cascade weapons had torn holes in reality itself, and those holes might not be completely stable. If the cascade fields started expanding again, they could eventually consume the entire solar system, including Earth. Humanity might have won the battle only to face slow extinction from their own weapons. Commander Susan Martinez was overseeing the reconstruction of Earth's orbital defenses using the limited resources that remained after the battle. Most of the industrial facilities that had manufactured spacecraft and weapons were gone, and humanity would have to rebuild their entire space-based economy, using only what existed on Earth and Mars. The converted civilian ships that had carried the quantum cascade devices were all destroyed in the battle along with their volunteer crews. Susan had compiled a list of the heroes who had given their lives to save humanity, and the names filled dozens of pages. Captain Tony Walsh and engineers Mary Chen and Bob Davis were just 3 of the hundreds who had flown directly into the alien fleet, knowing they would not return. Commander Martinez, we have received the final casualty report from the volunteer fleet, reported Lieutenant Paul Davis with tears in his eyes. All 67 ships were lost with no survivors. That represents 201 people who gave their lives to deliver the cascade weapons to their targets. Without their sacrifice, the alien fleet would have escaped and returned with reinforcements. Susan felt her heart breaking as she thought about all the brave men and women who had volunteered for what they knew was a suicide mission. These were ordinary people who had been working normal jobs just a week ago, but they had answered humanity's call when Earth needed them most. Their sacrifice had saved 8 billion lives, but that did not make their deaths any less tragic. President Baker addressed the surviving population of Earth from the rebuilt White House Communications Center. The speech was broadcast across the planet and transmitted to the remaining human settlements on Mars and the Moon. Her words would define how humanity understood their victory and the price they had paid for freedom. My fellow human beings, we have faced the greatest threat in our species' history and emerged victorious, President Baker said into the cameras. The Galactic Council demanded our surrender, and we answered with total destruction of their fleet. We have proven that Earth will never bow to alien masters regardless of the cost. But our victory came at a terrible price that we must never forget. The president went on to list the names of the colonies that had been lost, and the people who had died in the cascade reactions. She declared that humanity would rebuild stronger than before, and that the sacrifice of those who died would not be in vain. Earth was free but isolated and cut off from the galaxy by barriers of their own creation. Admiral Morrison received reports from deep space monitoring stations that were scanning for any signs of alien activity beyond the cascade fields. The quantum barriers seemed to be completely impenetrable, and no signals of any kind could pass through them. Humanity was truly alone in the solar system with no way to communicate with or travel to other star systems. Dr. Wells published her final report on the quantum cascade weapons and their long-term effects on local spacetime. The devices had created permanent alterations to the structure of reality that would persist for thousands of years. Future generations of humans would be trapped within the solar system until they developed technology that could safely navigate through or around the cascade fields. The barriers that protected Earth from alien invasion also prevented humanity from expanding to the stars. It would take decades of research to understand the cascade fields well enough to pass through them safely. Until then, Earth's children would grow up in a solar system that had been emptied by their parents' weapons. In the depths of space, automated Galactic Council probe ships detected the massive disturbance that had consumed the Sol system. The probes transmitted data back to the Council homeworlds, carrying news of an entire invasion fleet's disappearance and the terrifying weapons that had caused it. High Arbiter Zexthol's final warning was received and understood by the alien leadership. The Galactic Council declared the Sol system to be permanently quarantined and established a blockade zone extending 50 light-years in all directions. No Council ship would ever approach Earth again, and the human species was officially classified as extremely dangerous and unpredictable. Humanity had achieved something that no other species in galactic history had managed, which was to make the mighty